remember in the 90s when we had kind of the space between when Reservoir Dogs come out and Pulp Fiction, there was a kind of slew of cool crime movies that sort of came out in the wake of those two films, and the video shops were flooded with the likes of these type of films, the cool gangster movies of little mini phase of the 90s and kind of late 80s. This film kind of reminds me of that, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. We are talking The Blacklight, directed and co-written by Nick Snow. Now, to me, this is kind of like Quentin Tarantino meets Guy Ritchie by way of Jason Blum. It's maybe the kind of the log line I would say for this one. What is the story? Now, this is a lower budget movie. Let's just kind of put that out there first of all. It's not a high production film, but it definitely has influences from that kind of style of films and filmmakers, I would say. It primarily focuses on a character called Danny, who is once a kind of criminal who is trying to move away from that life of crime, and ultimately these days has a somewhat of a mundane life, working as a landscape gardener, but pretty much he is a little bit miserable with his kind of lot in life. Now, he sees an easy opportunity one day to kind of get a quick kind of score here, and inevitably this leads him to meet another guy who is this kind of rich kid who is really wanting for nothing, but he has this kind of desire to have a little bit of danger on in his life, and he kind of wants to team up with Danny to ultimately do a couple of scores, not because he needs the money, it's purely for him because he needs the adrenaline, the kind of the rush, you know, he feel like he's breaking the rules, but also he has someone there who is somewhat more experienced. They do a couple of jobs, but they discover there is one potential big job that this kind of rich guy, he knows this house which has got apparently a lot of valuable artifacts in, so they decide to rip it off. Now they get a third guy called Kit, who is a little bit more experienced in kind of violence, therefore they need a little bit more of a tough guy to kind of go into this particular kind of heist, so to speak. And this Kit, he's got, you know, a bit of a drug problem, you might say, and he owes money to the kind of the wrong people. So the three of them try to kind of rip off this kind of large, very kind of like well-defended, kind of stately manor kind of type home, but they discover there's more in them than they initially thought. There's more people that than they were expecting, but primarily there's one particular kind of thing in there, which is this kind of occult artifact, which if it's essentially possessed by someone, gives the person possessing it supernatural powers. Now, inevitably, this is a good opportunity for a gang of criminals, you might say, but this leads them into all sorts of trouble. Interpersonal struggles are the least of their problems, and we find out the local mafia has also taken interest in this artifact. But not only that, we have a group of cultists who want the artifact for their own nefarious means, and even they have some kind of personal struggles that are going on. But it doesn't even stop there, because we have someone from Danny's past who has a beef with him, who also wants a piece of the action, along with a smattering of other characters as well. So what we have here is a fast-paced crime drama with a kind of a sprinkling of the supernatural and a kind of horror element in it, making quite a stylistic movie. Now, I enjoyed this movie quite a bit. This is the sort of thing where I enjoy finding this kind of a B-movie gem, and it's actually kind of why I like doing these reviews, because I always say often you'll come up across a film like this, which you've never really heard of before, but you thoroughly enjoy, and this is one of those movies. So yeah, it's going to be a positive review. Let's talk about what I think I liked about this one. And there is a couple of things maybe I didn't like so much, but we'll come on to that. So the big thing for me, I think, is the character work here was excellent. We essentially have three male leads in the form of these three inept criminals to a degree, and we also get a female lead who comes in a little later. But I gotta say, each of these characters I thought were very, very well developed. We get a good grasp of who they are, where they are in this kind of time in their lives, and what they've come from, their motivations, and their kind of interpersonal dynamics. I gotta say, I thought it was extremely well written and very well performed. And even characters who get less screen time and have less of an impact on the story, a lot of them I still felt we had a good idea of what they were coming from. Even like some of the kind of like the mafia henchmen, I still felt like I kind of have a good idea of their kind of personalities. Smaller parts, but you kind of feel like they are realistic to a point, well written, and you know, very personable in many ways. So I thought the characterization was excellent. But it means nothing if you don't have really good performances. But I've got to be honest with you, I thought all the performances here were great. There was not one dud among them. Everyone here, I thought, did a bang-up job of their acting, their roles, the emotional beats, the comedic moments, of which there are a few, which we'll come on to in a minute. But yeah, I think everyone here did an excellent job with their roles, making these kind of characters seem fleshed out, realistic and likeable when they need to be, and despicable when they should be as well. Great. So we got some decent characters. What's the story like? Well, I've got to say, this movie, it kind of has horror elements, but it plays much more like a kind of crime caper. There are some torture scenes. There are a couple of overt supernatural things that happen in the movie. Although it plays like these, that's more in the kind of the background to a certain degree. And the actual action is more like, let's say, a 90s kind of style Tarantino-esque movie in a lot of ways. But I've got to say, I was along for the ride. And this movie has a lot of turns in it. I mean, not exactly twists, but it goes in directions and things happen. People are affected in different ways that I wasn't expecting. And I'm not going to say how or what, but things happen in the movie that I kind of didn't think were going to happen. And part of that, is I've got to go on to now, is the tone. The tone of this movie is, I think, very deliberately done. The movie starts out and it's relatively comedic. It's not like a joke. It's not like a kind of a comedy movie. But there are some comedic elements, particularly in the first act of this movie, which makes you think it's going to be a relatively light-hearted movie. But then, you know, maybe from the second act onwards, that changes. And now there's one or two still comedic moments through the movie that have that kind of consistency. The tone does change and it becomes a lot more kind of serious. And when things happen, it's a lot more impactful from it, because you're not expecting this to happen because it's been so light previous acts, which I thought was all very good. And despite this movie having a reasonable amount of the status quo changes in regards to maybe who's on top, I never felt this movie was convoluted in its kind of plot. The forward momentum was very good. There is a couple of pacing issues, which I'll come on to in just a minute, but for the most part, you know, you're kind of understanding where characters are in the story, their kind of the relationship with each other, and where the plot is kind of going and that sort of thing. So that I thought was all handled well. The supernatural stuff, I think, is it's left somewhat vague, but I think it's enough to kind of give you the information that you need without kind of having to over-explain things and kind of you know we've just got to accept there is a supernatural force here that is kind of beyond the realms of human understanding to a certain degree. It does give you some ideas, but doesn't explain everything. But I thought it did enough. It did enough to kind of make you understand what's happening without having to, you know, dot every I and cross every T, so to speak. So, you know, and the movie on a technical level as well, I think it's well shot, it's well lit, the sound design is great, and there are some stylistic choices from the director here that I think for the most part work. With a couple of exceptions, which I'm now going to talk to. So what doesn't work for me? I think the movie's pacing is maybe the biggest issue that I have. It's not horribly paced, but the movie's maybe a little bit long than it needed to be. And it also has a certain sequences, in particular one very long extended flashback sequence that could have been cut way down. I mean, this flashback sequence, unfortunately, I think it kind of slows down the main plot because we spend too much time in this kind of flashback sequence, and it kind of goes through a lot of material. I didn't think that was the best idea. Maybe that could have been, you know, a sequence to the beginning, but you know, it is what it is. But yeah, that to me was the end of the biggest criticism I have necessarily. There are some editing choices other than that, which I feel when it transitions from one scene into another, for a couple of kind of seconds afterwards, you're thinking, I'm not quite sure what I'm watching here. because there is, you know, let me just say, stylistic choices from the director here to, again, make it look cool. But I think some of these transitions I don't think work particularly kind of well. But I have to say, I mean, outside of it obviously being a low budget movie and not having a lot of like VFX and kind of visual spectacle in regards to kind of the supernatural stuff, it's relatively understated and maybe a little disappointing for some. You know, I gotta say, I thought this movie was so well done. I will say, I think the ending might be disappointing for some. It ends in a particular way. I won't tell you what it is. I was okay with it, but I can imagine there will be people who are less than satisfied with the ending. But overall, I gotta say, if you like crime capers, crime action movies, but you want a little bit of kind of sprinkling of supernatural in there, then check this one out. I think it's worth a watch. I'm gonna give this one an 8 out of 10, a pretty high score for me. I really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the team behind this will come up with next. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Please do let me know, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.